It's time now for the Bob Siegel Show, a religious open forum where all questions are welcome. And now, here's your host, Christian apologist, Bob Siegel.
And this is Bob Siegel. So, you'd like to believe in God, but you wonder how God feels about global warming. After all, he created the planet, didn't he? Does global warming concern God? Well, my friend, I can only make a guess here. Even though I am a theologian, I don't say stupid things and put things in God's mouth if the Bible doesn't comment on it. They weren't talking about global warming when the Bible was written, as you obviously know. For what it's worth, I doubt that global warming is causing the Almighty to lose any sleep. Scientists and meteorologists are actually not in complete agreement on this subject. I know Al Gore announced years ago that the debate is over. The debate is over, but I don't take Al Gore too seriously because I've heard his positions on other things. As for God, he made the planet rather resilient. I can say that. And in his word, in the Bible, he does express far more concern for how human beings treat each other than how human beings treat the planet. But when ISIS attacked Paris and Obama responded, he somehow thought he was going to really stick it to the terrorists. He said this, we're going to show them, we're going to crack down on global warming more than ever. Boy, ISIS didn't exactly shake. Now, don't get me wrong. Does God care about the environment? Of course God cares about the environment. I care about the environment. But when matters that haven't truly been settled by science are seized by the government as an excuse to regulate business and regulate individuals, well, then I think we need to keep matters in perspective. And hopefully we can keep matters in perspective better than California does. California, the so-called liberal state. Now, liberal comes from the word liberating. Do you think California is a liberating state these days? It was once. Is it now? They don't seem to believe in a lot of liberation when you're going to the grocery store. This new rule that now you can't have a plastic bag, can't even have a paper bag. They'll sell you one, but they're hoping that if you have to pay for it, we'll have less. I've got a story to share you. It's a fun one. And it's a true story. I was there. It happened to me. I was at the grocery store this last Friday, merely buying a tube of toothpaste. The cashier smiled at me and said jokingly, "I'm a Crest gal myself. I give this toothpaste my seal of approval." At which time I responded in a lighthearted manner, "Oh, so in addition to being approved by the Dental Association of America, Crest also has your seal of approval. They should write your name on the box too, right next to the Dental Association." She laughed and then asked me in a good-natured way if I wanted to buy a bag to put the toothpaste in. "That'll be the day," I said. She nodded. "I understand. I guess you don't need a bag for such a small item," at which time I realized I needed to elaborate. I said, "Well, actually, what I meant was I wouldn't buy one of these bags even if my cart was loaded with groceries." Now, I recall other words and phrases, most of them coming out of my own mouth, words such as government intrusion, and of course, the sincere, friendly disclaimer, "Don't worry, I'm not blaming you personally. I know you aren't responsible for these stupid rules." Then she told me confidently and somewhat discreetly, almost under her breath, that she also thought the new bag rules were stupid and that she was a libertarian. Now, libertarians actually are what liberals claim they are. Once again, the word liberal is supposed to mean liberating. It doesn't seem to be practiced by people that like liberation anymore. Now, I'm not a libertarian myself. That is, I do not belong to the Libertarian Party. I'm an independent. Now, the party, why do I not join the Libertarian Party? I do hold a lot of libertarian-leaning views, but the party itself has its own inconsistencies. I'll say this for them, though. They at least try to be consistent. They try very hard, much harder than our so-called tolerant liberal Democrats who insist they are the party of choice, but seem to have very little love for bestowing choice upon our population. unless it's the choice to have an abortion, or as in California, the choice to get high on a joint. And when it comes to a choice of what to listen to on the radio or what to watch on TV or what kind of gas to put in your car, what kind of car should be made, or what kinds of loans banks should give out, whether we can have school choice, they don't seem to believe in a choice for anything else. Almost every other area of our life they wish to regulate, even to the point where we cannot have our groceries bagged for free, even if the store was willing to give it to us for free. After all, if I use a plastic bag, the polar ice caps will melt. Speaking of regulation, the election is over. Liberals, as represented in the Democrat Party, lost and lost big. They lost the presidency. They lost both houses of Congress. They lost many governorships across the land. We have majority Republican governors. But don't celebrate too quickly, Republicans. Before the new era commences, you need to be reminded that Democrats and the progressive constituents they represent are very flexible with rules. Rules in Washington can be changed depending on the situation. Rules across the country are also subject to special exception clauses. However, and this is very important, Democrats will make these rules. Republicans are expected to merely roll over and play dead and follow them, whether they're in power or not. Sound confusing? Don't worry, your old pal Bob is going to help you navigate. All you have to do is pay attention as I carefully explain how Washington truly works. Yes, it's time for Fun Rules from Democrats. They are fun rules. You're going to love these. Rule number 1, when Republicans lose the White House or lose majority rule in the House of Representatives and Senate, it means elections have consequences. The people have spoken. Democracy has given the green light for Democrats to rule, even if it means bills such as the Affordable Health Care Act are going to be jammed through without even a whisper of Republican affirmation. However, now pay attention, however, when Republicans win both houses of Congress and the presidency, leaving only a minority representation of Democrats in Washington, it means the people want bipartisanship. Republicans have a duty and obligation to reach across the aisle and compromise with Democrats. On this same subject, when Republicans in Congress refuse to compromise and refuse to work with Democrats, they are being partisan. But when Democrats in Congress refuse to work with Republicans, it is because they are people of conviction who cannot compromise in good conscience. When Republican politicians change their positions, they are flip-flopping. When Democrat politicians change their positions, they are evolving. Also, liberals are more nuanced than conservatives. They do not give in to simple-minded, one-dimensional thinking, such as thinking a terrorist is actually evil. However, when conservatives are accused of being homophobic for not believing in same-sex marriage, or racist for not wanting to re-elect Obama, or racist for believing in voter ID, their attempts to provide nuanced defense will be summarily rejected. Racism and homophobia are the only possible explanations for conservative positions. These are simple issues. There is no complexity. There are no facts even worth considering. When the mayors of sanctuary cities, moving on to the next rule, when the mayors of sanctuary cities refuse to cooperate with the federal government, well, it's merely a reminder of the importance of states' rights. Who the heck is the federal government to tell the state what to do? However, when the federal government's Supreme Court overturns the decision of over 30 sovereign states that defined legal marriage as the union of a man and a woman, well, we must remember that state rights do not apply to politically incorrect backwoods thinking. On a related subject, there is no important difference between a man and a woman where marriage is concerned. A child with two fathers or two mothers is just as well off as a child with both a father and a mother. However, when choosing a Supreme Court justice, we should understand that there are indeed distinct differences between men and women, and distinct differences between people of color and people that are white. Therefore, a Supreme Court justice of a different race and gender is going to bring a fresh perspective to the table. Here's another rule that comes from Democrats. When considering abortion, it is the woman's body and her choice. When considering the practice of smoking tobacco or eating too much sugar or consuming too much cholesterol-laced food, women and men alike must realize that their bodies are not their own. They're part of a larger national pool. Since the government is taking responsibility for our health, something we never asked the government to do, by the way, but since the government is taking responsibility for our health care, this same government should be allowed to fashion new laws that keep our bodies in shape, thus maintaining affordable health care for all. Another rule from the Democrats: other countries are allowed to have borders. America is not. That would be exclusionary, racist, and mean. Other countries are allowed to have a national language. America is not. That would be exclusionary, racist, and mean. Countries that have their own language and borders are allowed to criticize America for wanting the same. They can call us racist for it. Should America challenge the double standard of these countries, it will only support the charge of racism made worse by dangerous nationalism. Where our single country is concerned, America should celebrate diversity of culture instead of teaching national pride. The idea of a melting pot must be done away with. However, where the entire world is concerned, there's a global village. The cultures of each country should not be celebrated. And we should instead view ourselves as one big global community. We should also submit to international law. Well, folks, those are the rules of the Democrats. Aren't these rules fun? It could be the end of our country, but never mind. Just follow these rules and be the most popular politician or the most sensitive, politically correct person around the water cooler at work. Or if you're tired of politicians who pretend to be Santa Claus, maybe you'd be better off with the real Santa Claus. Welcome back to 1170 The Answer. I'm your host, Bob Siegel. Coming up later on today's show, Michael Hausam, who hosts the popular nationally syndicated radio program, House Rules. He and I will be discussing a lot of the post-election news. There's a lot of it. Speaking of news, another attack by a militant Muslim last week, this time at Ohio State. Okay. Now, it's the Christmas season. I want to be sensitive, so I'm not going to give this editorial as Bob. Let me put my PC hat on and comment on the terrorist. Now, a lot of times they're speculating immediately that it may not have been a Muslim. It may not have been an act of terrorism. This time we know it was a Muslim. We know it was an act of terrorism, but I'm still going to put my PC hat on because you hear this still. Let's not be hasty in our judgment. Religious jihad could have been embraced for any number of reasons. Maybe when he was a kid, his mother never bought him that sled he always asked for. True, the snowfall in Somalia is somewhat fleeting. Still, there could be any one of a number of reasons why somebody kills. As for taking him at his word that it was indeed religiously motivated, what does he know? Let us defend the poor lad, even though he is dead, and let us defend the other poor terrorists, even though they are not asking for our defense. Meanwhile, ladies and gentlemen, something much more threatening than militant Islam is going on, and I reported it to you last week, but we're continuing to cover this. Hold on to your seats. College campuses are still abundant in their supply of comfort rooms, where students get a teddy bear or a coloring book to overcome the trauma of a Donald Trump presidential victory. To all you parents listening right now, look, I don't know what you're paying to send your kids to college these days, but I do know this. You're paying too much. Well, if you'd like to weigh in on any of this, you can always reach me through Facebook, Twitter, or questions@bobsiegel.net. That's questions@bobsiegel, SIEGEL.net. Regarding the different rules for Republicans and Democrats that I shared in tonight's monologue in my online column, also Facebook, Brendan, Belinda, and Donald all like what I had to say, responding to that same article as it was published by the San Diego Rostra. There's a familiar comment. I mean, it's a new comment, but familiar points offered once again by a man who goes by the nickname Hypocrisy Question, meaning, of course, that he questions the hypocrisy of the articles he reads. We have heard from him before. I have read his comments over the air before. When he writes a comment on my column, I always tell him he's going to it's going to be over the air. He's told me that he's listened in. So hopefully he's listening in again right now, because I do want to say some things to him, and I'd like everybody to hear this because I know there's a lot of people like him out there. But before I read this comment, let me explain something. His response is sarcastic. Now, you are about to hear me take issue with his points, but please understand, I am not quarreling with the fact that he used sarcasm. It's pretty apparent to anyone who follows this program. I use sarcasm all the time. I see nothing wrong with it, because sarcasm can often make a point in a way that other kinds of arguments do not. There's a certain irony to it. As a matter of fact, what this gentleman is doing is responding to my own sarcasm in a piece that was written as satire and delivered in our last segment over the radio today as satire. We even played the music from Fractured Fairy Tales before I delivered it. Very clearly satire. So he can be sarcastic. I don't mind that. Having said that, though, the argument that he embodies in his satire, that I take very serious issue with. So here is hypocrisy question, referring to those satirical rules of Democrats that you heard in our last segment. Bob, I enjoy reading your columns. I appreciate that. Unfortunately, that's not the only thing he said. I enjoy reading your columns. In fact, I too know firsthand how it feels to be an oppressed white Judeo-Christian American male and how much institutional bias we have to overcome every day. I can only assume that it is even tougher if you are also a conservative Republican. In fact, throughout this entire world, the only one I can think of who may have it tougher is everyone else. And he says that in capital letters. Okay, let me respond to hypocrisy questioned, whom I have gotten to know so well from his thoughtful comments over the years. I've gotten to know him so well that his shortened name seems so much more appropriate. Hypocrisy. Many thanks, Hypocrisy, for the kind words and warm, sociable comments that you have treated me to these many years over the rostra. Rest assured, I enjoy reading your comments every bit as much. Where else can I find words so full of drivel, ad hominems, baseless, unsubstantiated statements, and colorful, fact-challenged comments? Putting aside the fact that I am actually not a Republican, but rather an independent, and a recent independent, because for most of my life and most of the years doing this radio show, I have been a conservative Democrat. I changed my affiliation just a couple of months ago. And putting aside the fact that the very article you responded to was written to challenge quick, simple classifications and instead call upon people who claim to be nuanced to actually demonstrate that nuance once in a while and start seeing people for who they are individually rather than who they are by skin color. And putting aside the fact that in my own case, I am not merely white, I am also Jewish, and my people do have a bit of experience with victimhood perpetuated by racists and fascists. Nothing serious, mind you. I mean, Jewish men, women, and children were executed in gas chambers, burned alive in ovens, 6 million, right in the smack in the middle of our enlightened 20th century. And putting aside the fact that poverty or success is no longer determined in America by skin color, putting all of that aside, your characterization of white males in general and your need to classify people into groups with shared characteristics simply based upon appearance speaks volumes about who the real racists are these days and actually corroborates my article. Now, so let me see if I'm understanding your brilliant point, Hypocrisy. All white males go into one basket and everyone outside the basket has had it worse? Oh, yes, yeah, you must be right. Although, well, now let's just think out loud together. There are a few white people who haven't been president of the United States, like Obama, or secretaries of state, like Condoleezza Rice and Colin Powell, or millionaire basketball players like Michael Jordan, or movie stars such as Whoopi Goldberg, Will Smith, Denzel Washington. Yeah, these celebrities have it so bad, and I'm white. They'd trade their lives for mine in a heartbeat because I've had a privileged life, right? And you'll never find people of color who agree with my conservative views. Oh, wait. Some of them agree, and we'll talk about who agrees when we return to the Bob Siegel Show. Welcome back to the Bob Siegel Show. I was reading a letter from Hypocrisy Questioned, who challenged what I said in my monologue, and also it was published on my column over the internet. And he was claiming that anybody that's white has been more privileged than anybody of another color. And I started talking about the fact that, well, What if somebody of color articulates the same conservative positions? For example, Ben Carson, he hates political correctness. So does Herman Cain. Both of them were my top picks in the primaries they ran for president on, by the way. And Dinesh D'Souza is in Whitey's Indian, as is governor and soon to be ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley. Loretta Lynch is Attorney General, and Hispanic woman, Sonia Sotomayor, well, all she does is sit on one of the 9 highest seats in the land as a Supreme Court justice. But you get my point? Or actually, hypocrisy question, you don't seem to get the point at all. But your willingness to make these kinds of statements under a nickname rather than your real name does demonstrate your courage. Thanks for reading and tuning in. Now, regarding what I said about the shopping bag and the stupid California laws, Ruth Ann says, Bob, you always express yourself so well. I totally agree with these comments. Well, thank you, Ruth. Why don't you go tell her that to hypocrisy question. Max says, Bob, I shall call this your toothpaste speech. Well, thanks, Max. That'll be a great thing to add to my resume. I once gave a toothpaste speech. Teddy says, I guess automobile tires will be banned next. Aren't those the things that burn forever when there's fire at the dump? Now, regarding the state of our college campuses, David says, I think we should defund all universities and other schools who publicly support or teach a political side, left or right. They should be forced to remain neutral. Yes, David, or hope that alumni and contributing patrons would grow embarrassed by their old alma maters and stop their contributions ASAP. Now, I wouldn't mind political opinion from professors so long as both sides were represented. If students heard a liberal professor and then went into another class where there was a conservative professor, then they would actually be learning how to think instead of what to think. Having said that, inasmuch as nothing like this is going to happen anytime soon, I'm with you. The schools should remain neutral. And here's what's really sad. Many of them think they are neutral. They do not view themselves as liberal or leftist, but rather moderate and mainstream. In their fantasy minds, they are merely articulating the normal common sense that any decent person ought to have. Since they do not allow any serious public discourse or debate on their campuses, their moderate so-called positions are never challenged. Let me introduce to you my special guest. Michael Hausam is a popular radio talk show host. His program is called House Rules, and it can be heard across the country. His show is live at 7 a.m. Pacific Time and 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Michael is a father of 5, business owner in Newport Beach, writer at several national websites, commentator, and this was an interesting fact, extraordinarily handsome. Now, I'm not just saying that because I did some research to see if indeed he is really thought of as extraordinarily handsome. And sure enough, I found a reliable source for this fact. It was found right on Michael's own website. Michael's senior class voted him most opinionated, and in his words, I still emphatically maintain that it was a compliment. Now, Michael has had me on his show several times. He's a fun guy, very astute with politics, also somewhat cynical, somewhat sarcastic, which explains 2 things. A, why we got along right off the bat. B, why he'll always fit in on the Bob Siegel Show. Michael, welcome to our program.
Well, it's a pleasure to be on the show. Listening to the segment coming into this, I suppose there should be a trigger warning. I am a white, domestically born U.S. citizen, heterosexual, and conservative politically.
Oh boy, I wish we had that music that they played on the Alfred Hitchcock movie, with the scream. I am cis male, and I'm also identifying as male. I should probably say that too. Yeah, well, Michael, do you just bow your head in shame every day and walk around on the street and apologize for being born who you were? No, I don't do that, but I do begin every day with 90 minutes of a quick evaluation of the privilege that I have, just by the nature of those particular things, how it was positively influenced my day yesterday, and how others that I don't even know that happened to cross my paths were, oh shoot, I got it written down. I can't read my writing. Well, you know what's funny, Michael, is that people just make this stuff up. It used to be that you were a racist if either hated somebody because of their ethnicity and skin color, or you were a bigot because you believed in some generalization that wasn't true. Now you could have somebody like Louis Farrakhan, or Reverend Wright, or Obama's past, just spewing this vile. And we say, well, that's pretty racist. And you could say, kill the white crackers. And we say, well, that sounds like racism in reverse. And it's, oh, no. That's not racist because we don't have any of the power. They just make this stuff up as they go. And what does the rest of the country do? We roll over and play dead, and we go along with it because we're afraid of being dubbed racist ourselves. It's like the emperor's new clothes.
Yeah. Also, I mean, obviously this is what's happened in the last little bit because of BuzzFeed. The people with whom you associate, if they have any sort of particular beliefs on anything that goes against the grain, you can be tarred with that. For example, what is the status of the guy that you buy your coffee from, the guy that you buy your gasoline from, the guy that changes your oil? How do they feel about, let's see, what are the important things? Same-sex marriage, abortion, drug legalization. And are they Nazis? Bob, do you buy donuts from a guy that's a Nazi, and does that make you culpable?
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, I've never bothered to ask, but I guess the next time I go into Winchell's or Krispy Kreme, I should realize that somebody may be getting the gas chamber because I love that glazed jelly donut. You know, exactly you've read The Onion, haven't you? The satirical news magazine?
You know what? I stopped reading The Onion about a year ago because I found that it was just as equivalent to read CNN or MSNBC.
That's my point. Exactly. I don't know how they stay in business. They come up with these made-up stories that's supposed to be funny. They can't make up anything stupider than what's really happening. And just when I think it can't get any stupider, it does. Michael, hold with me over the break, and then we'll come back and talk even more about how stupid things are getting when we return to the Bob Siegel Show. Welcome back to 1170 The Answer. I'm your host, Bob Siegel, joined by Michael Hausam, a fellow host, somebody that I like to think of as a friend, kind of a kindred spirit, has his own national radio show. Michael, before we go on, give your website and tell people how they can locate you quickly online.
A couple of things. The website is HausRules.us, and that's HausRules, and that's the name of the radio show. It's also the name of my Facebook site, House Rules with Michael Hausam. Pretty simple. There's one house rule, Bob. It is substance over symbolism. And on Twitter, also, you can follow me at MPHaus, MPHAUS. In any of those things, you've got to enable, whether you're on an iPad, phone, laptop, desktop, whatever, you absolutely have to enable sarcasm font. Because if you don't have the sarcasm font enabled, you won't get it.
Yeah, and in our politically correct world, political satire is only funny if it's The Daily Show or Saturday Night Live making fun of the liberals. Conservatives want to be funny, they're mean-spirited. Isn't it amazing, these rules that they come up with?
Well, it is. And, you know, I'm sure that I forget what it's called, but I'm sure that you find the same thing for the stuff that you publish. But I publish at IJ Review, at Town Hall. I'm working on a deal right now. I think I'll have my first one go up at the Federalist this week. And I've done a few at the Daily Caller as well. And there's a certain law, I forget what it is, that the greater the amount of sarcasm, if there isn't some sort of editor's note at the beginning of the piece, the greater the amount of sarcasm, the greater number of people that will think you're dead serious in a comment thread. There's a name for that. There's a law. I forget what it's called. But it just absolutely kills me when I'll write something and somebody will be like, wait a second. Because usually it's, you know, hey, here's yet another good idea for free market capitalists to endorse, and that is 35% tariffs on companies trying to import goods or something like that. And obviously it's written with my tongue jammed way the heck in my cheek. And somebody in the comment section will be like, wait a second, this isn't classic liberal free market position. How are you publishing this on Town Hall?
Yeah, it is.
Totally cracks me up.
It is. And I write for Communities Digital News as one of the places. And it's gotten to the point where if it's going to be a satire piece, a lot of times they'll just say that. There's a lot of concern these days over Obama making a big issue and social media enforcing that they're not going to publish fake news anymore. So one of the first ones to go was The Onion. Now, if anybody admits openly that there's satire, it's The Onion. And so why call that fake news? Why not just call it something funny that makes a point? I mean, it's ridiculous.
Wait a second. The Onion is on that list?
The Onion is on the list being banned from social media. Twitter is one of them. I believe Facebook is the other. The Onion. And I was told by my editors that we have to be careful. The piece I did as my opening monologue was first published on the Community's Digital News a few days ago. And it's not that they don't like satire and it's not that they don't trust my writing, but they did tell me, they went ahead and published it, but they said we're starting to be a little more careful because we could end up being, of course, it's just code for anything that's conservative or anything that's not politically correct. That would include, if we're not careful, it could include anything from Fox News, anything from National Review. I think, I don't even know if the Wall Street Journal would be an exception. At the moment, that's not happening, but there is this fear because when you hear people like President Obama, who complains a lot about the news, Fox News is always the one that comes out of his mouth. I don't know if you heard his recent interview. He's blaming Fox News that Hillary lost the election. And he talks about how, because Fox News is on in every bar. He says Fox News is in every bar in every airport. First of all, most bars aren't interested in the news. And second of all, when I'm at the airport, I always see CNN. It's only been recently that they've had Fox News in the hotels I stay at. There was a time I couldn't even get Fox News in a hotel room. They're the number one rated cable news. But so, the guy's our president. He doesn't even know what he's talking about.
The thing that was so interesting to me about that, and if I recall this, the precise comment was bars and restaurants across America. That it was
yes, you're right. Bars and restaurants. Yeah, that's what he said.
And forgive me for correcting the host, but I take.
Oh no, go. That's fine. That. Yeah.
The thing that's kind of behind that. I mean, think about what he's actually saying. So, and obviously he's talking, first of all, he's talking down his nose to flyover land, right? So it's, it's not at some shishi place in Manhattan or in San Francisco or in Los Angeles. It's in Terre Haute or Peoria. Well, and what he's saying is that these folks are at their local watering hole, or they're at the Cracker Barrel, or they're at Chili's or whatever. And they totally would have been down with grandma as president, right? But off in the background, Fox News is running. And what he's saying is that the folks that his party can typically depend on as a base have this stuff trickle in, and they basically can be brainwashed that, you know what, this poor guy specifically, I guess, in this election, it would have to be Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. This poor guy was totally down for grandma, but he was brainwashed by a little bit of Fox News trickling in, and he went to the dark side. It's so condescending.
And God forbid they turn it on when it's Megyn Kelly or Geraldo Rivera or Chris Wallace, the liberals at Fox News. It's ridiculous. It's somebody who can't take responsibility. And when he talks about the watering hole, or back in 2008, those that cling to their Bibles and their guns, for a person who talks about reaching out to the working class, he's so elitist. He's talking to his Ivy Tower friends. It's a two-class system. It's like the patricians and the plebeians back in ancient Rome. And these are the same people that when they're trying to justify illegal immigrants staying in the country, because there's a certain kind of work that we citizens won't do, but the people that come from Mexico will do it. Michael, have you ever heard of a more blatantly racist comment than that? And yet these are the ones giving us the self-righteous, sanctimonious lectures about racism.
No, you're exactly right about that. And it speaks so far down to supposedly his, the followers. And if I were a Democrat, and if I were, not a not a cult of personality, but if I actually believed, if I was a redistributionist leftist, if I was a progressive, and whatever particular issues that I felt were really important, and I thought that the Democrat Party was the place that voice would be most heard, but I had particular issues with the candidate that they put out. If I just didn't think Grandma would be the right person to be president, what he's saying is that it wasn't because I came to some reasoned conclusion that I didn't vote for Grandma. It was because I was infected by something else, and I didn't have the wisdom and intelligence to know what was right and what was wrong. It's just, if I was that guy, and obviously, what was it? It was like, I forget what it was. Were there 200 or so counties that formally voted for Obama in 2 elections and ended up voting for Trump?
Well, that's why it's under his skin, because it's more of a referendum on him than on her. Not that there isn't plenty of material for her. Don't misunderstand me.
Right. Well, what my point is that it's a big, huge swath of the population that he's talking about, and he's simply dismissing them. And frankly, as a conservative, Bob, I love this.
Yeah, because it's good fodder. Okay, hold that thought.
Fodder, and it's gonna be that they're gonna be out of power for a lot more years to come.
I sure hope so. Hold with me for one more break, Michael. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our program. Michael, we're down to our last segment. I know you and I know me, we're going to be right in the middle of something juicy when it's time to suddenly sign off. So what I'm going to do is leapfrog through time a little bit right here. And let me ahead of time, thank you for coming on the show. You're a great guy. I hope you'll come on sometime for the whole hour and we can give you more time than we did tonight. I know that it cuts in a little bit to your Sunday schedule. I do appreciate you joining us at 6:30 though.
Well, thanks for having me on. It's a privilege. Obviously, my publicist will just have to make sure that the deposit from your publicist is substantial enough to warrant a 60-minute commitment.
There we go. Hey, now, you were saying something. I like your when you talk about your shows, I like that phrase, symbolism over substance, because that does describe the hollowness. You know, we talk about political correctness.
Whoa. You had it backwards.
No, yeah, right. It's substance over symbolism. Substance over symbolism. Yeah, I'm remembering. You know why I did that? Rush Limbaugh used to talk about that, and he used to accuse the liberals of having symbolism over substance. So, but right. No, yes, of course, it's symbolic and it's hollow. And for example, you know what I find interesting is when I meet a liberal, I don't even have to hear them identify themselves as a liberal. If I hear somebody's position on abortion, and let's say somebody says I'm pro-choice, I also know they're pro-same-sex marriage. And I also know that they're pro-Palestinian over Israel. You would think that those 3 issues wouldn't have anything to do with each other. And they really don't, other than the fact that there's this package, this list of things you're taught in the media at our universities, and you're expected to march in step. I'm not a prophet. I shouldn't know what somebody believes about one issue just because of his position on another issue. But I do. And I think that's only because of the shallowness of our culture right now.
Right. You know what it does? I would actually quibble with those things just a little bit. I could probably go into a little bit of nuance. I wouldn't necessarily agree completely with what you said. But what it does make me think of, how our widely disparate issues always have the same types of folks on opposite sides, whether it is Palestine or tax rates or the environment or, whatever. Have you ever read the book Conflict of Visions by Tom Sowell?
No, I'm familiar with some of the other columns and stuff of Thomas Sowell, but I have not read that book.
Do yourself a favor. It's an older book. It's probably a decade old, maybe longer. And it is by far it used to be my favorite fiction book used to be Atlas Shrugged, but it's now also nonfiction. But prior to that,
oh no kidding,
Conflict of Visions was this historically always been my favorite nonfiction book, And basically what Soule does is he goes back about 400 years talking about philosophy and politics and history and economics and tracing various different ideologies and thoughts to figure out how it is that the same guys that are in the BDS movement are also the same guys on the raise the wage movement, are also on the same side of the, for a leftist for the Supreme Court. Why are they all? You'd find it an incredibly interesting.
Well, especially since what they criticize about one side is sooner or later going to be found on the other side. For example, you take the feminist movement that talks about the way women are abused. They talk about the Republican Party as if they abuse women when actually we've nominated people like Sarah Palin to be vice president. And yet you talk about how the Taliban are cutting off the hands of women for teaching, or in some Middle Eastern countries, a husband can rape his wife and it's considered okay, or people get stoned to death. I mean, you would think that the feminists would be up in arms over this. If ever there's a place in the world where women are still being treated like slaves, it's in some of these Middle Eastern countries. And yet it's just not politically correct now to say anything against the Muslim culture. And yet if that was going on out in the West or being done in the name of Christianity, they would. So that's where I see that, you can kind of predict where they're going to come because it stays within the boundaries of political correctness to them, or what's currently politically correct. It absolutely
does. And mentioning whether it's a racial issue or sex issue, identity politics has a particular line that's acceptable. And it's just like across the street from me. I live right around the corner from UC Irvine. In fact, if I go out onto my back deck, I can see the back end of the college. I mean, I'm just literally a few hundred yards away from the border. And, one of the hugest things that they talk about constantly, not just at UCI, but at colleges across the country, are diversity, right? But the one kind of diversity that they absolutely do not want under any circumstance is any sort of diversity of thought.
Exactly. When they say diversity, they don't mean diversity of opinion.
No, it's I've got an earring, you don't. I have a ponytail, you don't. You're dark-skinned, I'm light-skinned. Absolutely wonderful diversity. But if our opinions are diverse, then that's a huge problem.
Yeah, and now even if somebody wants to embrace somebody's culture by playing a certain kind of music or wearing their hair a certain way, now they got a new politically career. You've co-opted my culture. Well, Michael, the time went by far too quickly. Listen, you are a terrific guy. I hope you'll come back and be a semi-regular guest on my program.
Yeah, I'd love it, Bob. This is great. Happy to hear it.
Okay, take care, my friend, and Merry Christmas.